Hello there, my name's James Kelly and welcome to this very special episode of the Scot Goes Popcast for the Alba NEC elections, which are taking place over the weekend, I believe, and I'm standing for the NEC and I'm also standing for the membership support convener position, although I think that vote closes today, so that may be too late. But I decided to try and organise some sort of informal hustings and tried to invite other candidates to take part. It looked possible that would happen. It may still happen because I'm going to try again later today. But for the moment, delighted to say we have Neil Sinclair and Craig Dempsey, who I presume are here to raise points and maybe to ask questions. And does anybody want to kick off?
I'll kick off, James. If you are lucky enough to be elected,
yeah,
what are you going to do to push the Alba name forward to the general public?
As an NEC member, how do you push the Alba name forward to the general public? Well, I suppose I am a blogger, and there's a potential advantage to that as an NEC member because I have a higher public profile than some of the others. And, having me there, I can sort of in the loop, I can, promote what's going on to some extent. Although there is this problem when I was on the NEC between 2021 and 2022, and we were constantly reminded about confidentiality. So it's quite frustrating, you could have put out all this positive stuff from, very constructive meetings without breaching anybody's real confidentiality. But I always felt a bit held back because I didn't know how far that confidentiality rule went. But yeah, I think, we all have our own way of promoting it. And to a great extent, it's about getting the name out. It's just reminding people that Alba exists and are a serious option. And hopefully, as I have been a blogger, quite a high profile independence blogger for 15 years, the fact that I've joined Alba and I'm very active in it, hopefully that is a positive sign to people that that Alba should be taken seriously, and is taken seriously by people who have been around the independence movement for a long, long time.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, I actually work for Neil Hanvey.
Okay.
And the biggest problem we have, Neil's face is so well known now in Kirkcaldy. People say hello to him and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
They still think he's SNP.
Oh, do they?
They still think, yeah. So I think the Alba Party, I was a long-time member of the SNP. I left in 2017. I was basically homeless until the Alba Party came along. Now, I knew about the Alba Party because I knew Neil.
Yeah, sure.
I was part of Neil's campaign when the SNP dropped him. So that's how I found out about it. And I think the Alba Party has had a problem, not with policies or anything like that, but getting the recognition from the Scottish public.
Yeah.
The mainstream media basically tried as hard as they can to ignore us.
Yeah.
And, we need their support. Now, one of the things I do for Neil is I send out all these press releases and things like that. It's only the past month that I've actually journalists contacting me to find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But they still don't print it, which I find so frustrating. So I think one of the jobs the NEC has to do, we're not going to get any favours from mainstream media. We need to find a way of breaking the name Alba through to the general public. And as I say, Neil's been an Alba MP since he started, but people in Kirkcaldy still assume he's SNP. And I think it's a problem that the party has.
I think if to get success at a general election as a small party, what you need to do, if you have a sitting MP, if you're lucky enough to have a sitting MP as we do and as you do, you have to be like a kind of American congressman. I remember people saying about Jim Murphy in 2001 when he held his seat, which was had previously been a very safe conservative seat, and he managed to hold it. And they said it was because he had been like an American congressman and he'd just written letters and just promoted his own name to such an extent. And he built a real relationship with the constituents. And I get the impression, I haven't been to, you know, Neil's patch or your patch, but I get the impression that he in particular of the two MPs has done that and has really built a strong relationship. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be enough to win him his seat next year, but you know, if you were going to try and do that, then he's doing it the absolutely correct way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally agree. This is what we've done for the past 6 months. You know, we get Neil out in the community as much as we possibly can. His face now in the local papers is recognised. It's just the name. I mean, I hope come a general election that the SNP see sense and don't stand in certain seats. Fergus Ewan made the comment about Angus Brendan McNeill. I think it should stand for Kenny and for Neil, because if the SNP stand Kirkcaldy, it'll go to Labour. I'll guarantee that. Yeah. So I think there's negotiations could be done there.
Well, I did a podcast the other night, and I think maybe it's worth repeating what I said that night, because it's just directly relevant to what you said, which is that, you know, there's a precedent here. In the late 1980s, the merger, the botched merger took place between the Liberals and the SDP, and that ended in extreme acrimony, which could in some ways be compared to the acrimony that currently exists between the SNP and Alba. And yet, come the 1992 election, there was a weird outbreak of common sense, because 2 of the 3 SDP MPs who refused to join the Liberal Democrats stood for re-election. Those were Rosie Barnes and John Cartwright. And the Liberal Democrats, amazingly, did not put up candidates against them. And because they didn't, they very nearly held their seats, which would have seemed impossible because they had no organisation behind them. The SDP had folded, and yet with with tacit Liberal Democrat support, they almost held on. So there's a lesson there for the SNP to use their heads. You know, however angry they may be at Neil Hanby and Kenny McCaskill and Angus McNeill, the bigger picture is: do you want Labour MPs, or well, it would be Labour MPs in those 3 seats? And in particular, that's the problem in the Western Isles, because as I pointed out the other night, once an MP gets in the Western Isles, he might be there for the rest of his life. You know, if you like Torquil Crichton in for Labour, he might be there literally for the rest of his life. So you've got to look at the bigger picture and put emotion and ego to one side.
Yep.
However, I don't hold out much hope that the SNP will do that.
Well, there's always hope. There's always hope.
Well, we'll see.
I mean, the SNP, you know, I mean, I'm not going to slag them off, but they are in a very poor financial situation at the moment. Yeah. They really don't have the money to fight 57 seats properly. So they would be better off looking at maybe their 30, 35 seats that they could win and concentrating on them rather than splitting the vote.
Well, I think it's very difficult for the SNP as a sort of very large party to sit out seats unless there's a good reason. And so I think in the Western Isles, it's a no-brainer, because they are not going to, you know, Angus McNeill is high enough profile that the SNP are not going to finish ahead of Angus McNeill. So it's obvious that if you want a pro-independence candidate to win that seat, you have to, you know, give Angus McNeill a free run. And Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath and East Lothian, it's good, you know, it's a harder call because the SNP could make the case that they are better placed. But you know, on the other hand, Neil Hanby and Kenny McCaskill are the sitting MPs, and they both have a very high profile. So it's a more sort of balanced argument in those seats. But in the Western Isles, Oh, we've got another person in the waiting list. This is fantastic. We're gonna have 4 people. Hello, Trish. Can you hear us? Hello, Trish.
She's on mute.
Well, she's not showing us on mute, but anyway, hopefully she'll join us in a moment. So anyway, do you want to continue, Craig, or does Neil have a question? Or
well, I'm kind of bouncing off Craig's question there, because Alba's biggest problem just now in getting public recognition is that the mainstream media ignore us.
Yeah.
But in modern times, we have alternatives. We have the social media, we have internet, we have podcasts such as your own. I'm just wondering, as a member of the NEC, do you see a bigger role for the website, for Alba's website? Do you think it's worth investing some more money in that to make it a bit of a slicker operation?
I think Alba's website looks pretty good, but you know, there's always room for improvement. I think, you know, when I was a member of the SNP, I was always frustrated with how, you know, bland and poorly written some of the press releases were, and you know, you almost just wanted to get my hands on it. It's just I could see ways of making it better. Certainly, when I was on the NEC, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I was not given a role, so I mean, I couldn't. You know, I mean, I suppose I had a vote, so if a vote had come up about that, but I did not, you know, I was not given the opportunity to post anything on the website. I was not given the opportunity to record a video. I did put myself forward for that, but I wasn't given that opportunity. So, you know, there's a limit to what you can do as an ordinary NEC member, but certainly if I had the power, I would try and supercharge the website.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I think a website should be engaging and interesting. It can be a bit of a noose around your neck as well if you don't do it right. I believe the SNP over the past 3 years has spent something like £2.5 million on getting their website sorted out, because there are problems apparently in, you know, the things in the background, the databases and so on and so forth. So my thinking is that Alba, if they spend the right money right now on getting the website sorted out, and particularly sorting out any background issues or maybe with databases, that would be money well spent, well invested at the beginning, rather than letting things grow and grow and grow and fester.
As a matter of interest, what do you think is deficient about the website?
I find it quite hard to navigate. I have to say, I find it quite hard to get to what the information I want.
Yep.
Actually, I've got a personal example of that, because I stood for the four, you know, the conference committee, the appeals committee. I did that in February, and I wasn't told the result of those elections, and I spent quite a bit of time looking for the results on the website, and eventually I just said, I wrote to somebody. It was my third attempt to follow it up, having not got any reply. And I said, well, you know, I haven't been told the result. I presume I haven't been elected, but I think as a candidate, I've got the right to know what the result of the election was. And the reply was, oh, it's been on the website the whole time. And she sent me the link, and it was there, but I had really made a genuine attempt to look for it, and I could not find it. So yeah, you're right. It is difficult to navigate.
I have to say, I think there's a wee courtesy thing there, in that if it's up there on the website and you're a candidate, they should say, "Hey, Mr. Kelly, this is the link. These are the results. Sorry, you didn't get in," or whatever.
Actually, it's worse than that, because I was elected. I actually was elected to one of the committees, but I didn't know. Nobody had told me.
Oh dear.
I was elected to the appeals committee, and yeah, I was on the appeals committee for 2 months, and nobody told me.
No appeals in that period, and that's probably good news.
Yeah, no appeal came up for about 6 months. One came up about a few weeks ago, although we still haven't heard them. So who wants to continue? Sorry?
Is Trish managing to come through yet? Just
hello, Trish. Trish, you're on mute if you want to pitch in. Hello, Trish. Well, Trish is here in spirit. And maybe,
a cup of tea.
maybe she'll join us in person.
Sorry, hi, I am here. I'm just having a wee bit of difficulty with my phone trying to get to the correct bit. I'm going to just listen in for the moment till I figure it out.
Okay, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
So who wants to continue, Craig or Neil?
Well, I've got another wee question. As a member of the NEC, would you be in favour of Alba promoting one particular political agenda? You know, are we a left-wing party? Are we a right-wing party? Do we like the gender ideology thing? Do we think that's a very bad thing for society? So what kind of party do you think Alba should present itself as? And if whichever way that is, shouldn't we have more clear policies up at the website and out there in the press and in the media?
Well, I think we all know where Alba stand on the gender identity issue, because, you know, when I was at the conference, the enthusiasm for, you know, the rights of women and girls was
Hmm.
as great or even greater than anything to do with independence. So I mean, the weight of opinion in the party is I think beyond dispute. Although of course there are one or two people who take a dissenting view, such as Craig Murray.
You see, the thing is, if you go onto the website, you can't really see a very clear statement of that. You've got something from, I think, a year ago, 2 years ago, talking about women's rights, but there's nothing really more recent. I mean, again, it may be there, and I just haven't found it. But
well, I
think
do, I do feel that we should not become, you know, the gender identity party any more than the SNP or the gender identity party with the opposite view. I don't think there's any question what our view is, but I think it was getting to the point where that was consuming everything, and that was what defined the party. And there is no way forward for the Alba party like that. There aren't enough people who care. I mean, there are people who care about the issue. I'm not denying that for a moment, but you're not going to win seats on that basis. I don't think.
That's it, because if you look at the website and look at industrial strategy, right, the only thing that's up there is a thing in the hemp industry, and Scotland doesn't have a hemp industry.
Okay.
You know, there needs to be something up there on wind energy. Are we going to be a manufacturer of wind turbines? Are we going to be a manufacturer of steel using green energy? There should be much more on industrial strategy than there is currently on the website. And my opinion is very clear that we should be having much more hard-line political debate, if you want to put it in those terms, because I think what a lot of the voting public feel is that all the parties are the same, none of them have their interests at heart, and none of them really have a clear vision of what their country should look like and what under their government their country would become.
Well, I suppose the USP of Alba is independence with urgency, rather than pretending to support independence as the SNP do. So any other policy, you have to sort of weigh that up as whether this is going to be a distraction or whether this is going to add something. However, I think with Alex Salmond as the leader of this party, I mean, we all know what Alex Salmond's background is in terms of where he positioned the SNP. Well, I think it's fair to say that he was the person who positioned the SNP well, maybe this may be an exaggeration, but he certainly made the effort to say this is a social democratic party, which means left of centre. Was it quite as clear as that before? I'm maybe not old enough to know, but the impression I get is that under Gordon Wilson wasn't quite as clear as that. But I mean, I think there was never any doubt that Alba were going to be a social democratic party, although of course we're not. We're caricatured as something else. We're caricatured as some people say we're a far right party. Just simply because of the trans issue, we're a social conservative party. But
that's kind of my point, is that we should be clear. I mean, if we're independence first, foremost, that's nothing else, but independence is important, then we should state clearly we will disband when we achieve independence and other political parties will take over. Well, of course, that's not possible, because the party which takes a country to the threshold of independence should then be the party which forms a new constitution, forms a new government, forms the first government of New Scotland, and provides the financial markets and the external countries the confidence to know that the country is going forward with confidence and with a vision. And my humble opinion is that we need to provide, Alba need to provide that kind of vision to encourage people to vote for us and to let other countries and other people know where we stand.
Hello, Trish. You've appeared in person.
Hi.
Just so we all know where we are you standing as a candidate in any of these elections?
I'm standing as on the ordinary member
Okay.
under the female selection.
So we're not in direct competition simply because of our gender.
Are you guys? I know that you are, James. But Neil and Craig, are you guys up for nomination?
No. They're just here to ask questions of us, I think.
Right, okay.
So maybe it's time I give some space to Trish then, if Neil or Craig want to ask Trish any questions.
Yeah, well, Trish, if you don't mind me asking, but we were speaking there about the Alba Party and how we go about getting more public recognition. Now, I fully understand it can't all be down to the NEC, but do you have any ideas on how we can promote the party in a way that the public will take us seriously? At the moment, mainstream media choose to ignore us. Is there anything you could think of that would help put the name out there?
Clone Alex Salmond.
If
I
only.
think as far as from my point of view, I think that what we have to do is the work on the ground. You know, I take your point on the mainstream media and the coverage that we get there. But you know what Alex has been doing recently, it's unbelievable. If you think back to 2 years ago, we would not have heard his name or seen him on STV or BBC, and we've seen both of those last night, which is remarkable, and I don't think anyone else could have done that. So I think that he just has to keep plugging away at that, and we just have to, you know, do our bit on the ground. I don't think we can control what's happening in the mainstream media, but I think we can control to a lesser extent what's happening on the ground and have that public visibility in our own communities. And I think we've got to do an awful lot more of that, because, you know, a lot of people have heard of Alba now, but they still don't really know what we stand for, other than, as James said, you know, we're sometimes described as far right, etc. And you know, far right is I'm very left of centre myself, having been brought up by a Marxist and fully indoctrinated from a very early age. But in later life, I went on to work for a legal practice, and their job was to make money. And so I can see it from both sides of the equation now. I'm not quite as left as I was, but you know, I really enjoy having the conversations with people when they say, you know, when you go round the doors and canvassing, and you have people say, "Oh no, I could never vote for Alba because, you know, I'm going to vote Conservative because we're the party of business." And I said to them, "Well, in an independent Scotland, do you think we're going to have no businesses?" Of course we're going to have businesses. Of course we're going to be, you know, that's our thing. We want to promote Scotland, Scottish producers, Scottish makers, Scottish markets. That's our thing. We want Scotland to thrive and excel on its own account. But as far as visibility is concerned, I think all we can do is try and recruit as many more members as we possibly can, you know, go flat out. We're all having the conversations. But silly things, or simple things, I should say, like I've made up some wee calling card things. Like this.
Oh, smashing.
And they're the kind of things that you can, if I'm in the doctor's surgery, I can just nip that on the coffee table. If I'm speaking to someone, I can hand it to them. They've got it in their pocket, they'll pass it on. All these kind of much simpler, smaller things, I think, is what we as the ground troops should be doing and can do. I'm not going to say that's going to, you know, give us a breakthrough electoral success, but, you know, we all just have to do what's within our capabilities.
I mean, sorry, James, I agree exactly what you're saying about how we need to do the work on the ground. That has to be done. There's no doubt about it. What Alec has done over the past few months has been great. And it has the fact he's now getting on television and things like that. Fantastic. My worry is that we become the Alex Salmond party.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, irrespective of Alec's past, there is still a percentage of people who believe that he was some kind of sex pest. That you know, there is still. So, yeah, great what Alec's doing, but we need to promote the Alba party. And I'll go back very quickly just to say that we need to have we need to define the party and as far as policies go. You know, it's okay saying, right, we're independents with urgency. That's great, but we need people to understand the 5. I stood last year as a candidate in the council elections. The 5-point poverty plan, every single person I spoke to thought it was fantastic. But okay, it's on the website, but try and find it. Yeah. That plan would list so many kids out of extreme poverty. I'm not saying it's a cure. That's not what I'm saying. But it's a left of centre policy that the Scottish people would like. But we need to take these policies out there as opposed to just relying on Alec. So for me, the way to do it is get out in the communities, street stalls, things like that. Sorry, James, I interrupted you.
No, I was going to sort of go back to something that Neil and I were discussing briefly before we started the actual.
Is it just me? Is the meeting frozen?
You're back. You were frozen briefly, but
sorry about that.
No, well, we were discussing. There is some frustration with the way that these elections have panned out, these internal elections, because, well, I mean, we all know that there was a major disaster because the elections had to be rerun. But even apart from that, I know there's been some frustration that nobody has a full list of the candidates. You know, I mean, we're running an informal hustings today, which is the day before, it's tomorrow or the day after the vote takes place. But anyway, we're very close. There's been no hustings run by the party centrally.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm trying to do with my own campaign to be elected is to say that also, you know, why is the electorate for the ordinary NEC members, why is that so restricted to people who have essentially paid a premium to vote by becoming a so-called conference delegate, which is just somebody who has bought a conference package? And I think that the entire NEC, possibly with the exception of the two parliamentary leaders who should be there as of right, but apart from those, the entire NEC should be directly elected by the whole membership. And I also think the other committees, committee, the disciplinary committee, the appeals committee, and there is one other committee that I can't think of off the top of my head. I can't see any reason why those shouldn't be elected by the whole membership. It's almost like, I don't know if the reason for this current system is to help the leadership control the outcome of these elections by having a more restricted franchise, or whether it's just to give the conference and the National Council something to do, which is not a good enough reason. You know, we should be empowering the membership, because that will also encourage more people to join if they can see that by, say, moving from the SNP to Alba, they're going to have much more control over the party they're a member of. And so I've been asking, probing whether other NEC candidates agree with this position. And actually, you know, I think because there's no logical reason against it, no logical argument against it, most generally they'll say, yeah, I'm in favour of that in principle. But, you know, I think we need people who are really committed to that to really sort of drive that forward. And as Trish is the only other NEC candidate on this call at the moment, I thought, what do you think about that, Trish? Are you in favour of a fully elected NEC?
Well, that sounds entirely reasonable to me, but I do agree with, you know, your comments about whether it's restricted to well, you're restricted to the people that pay the premium, as you say. But I think that potentially it is about, you know, keeping power at the top.
Yeah.
And I very much want Alba to be a member-led party, so I would be behind that. But I don't know how much influence NEC would actually have. How much influence do we have on the NEC? There was a discussion at the recent Glasgow event, and they were discussing whether to have 4 or 6 ordinary members on the NEC from the general public, and the vote was carried for let's continue with 4 ordinary members rather than the 6 that had been proposed. And at the time I thought, well, Alex, you know, was for the 4 members, and he said, well, you know, that's, if we have 6, then that's 2 extra people that are not boots on the ground. They're gazing at their navel and sitting at a computer screen. And we need as many activists out there as we can. But then someone else pointed out, well, not everybody can be physically an activist, you know, particularly for those of us that are a wee bit longer in the tooth.
Yeah.
Or in some way, you know, disabled or incapacitated by other life happenstances. And so I accepted that, and I thought, well, why should we not have 6? Why should the membership not have more of a say than they do currently? So yeah, I would be behind that proposal. I'd be with you on that, James. I'm
I mean,
not quite sure how amenable HQ would be to that. Or to
well, if they were
the-
amenable to
I
it, we'd
think-
already have it. But what I was going to say was that, you know, if you look at the way the SNP has been sort of taken over by a faction, by a clique,
Yeah.
how is that possible? I mean, this stuff matters. Internal election rules matter, because if you ensure, you know, it's like fixing the roof when the sun is shining. If you ensure that it is a member-controlled party, then you can't, you know, sort of change the constitution, or you can't, you know, sort of finesse elections, or you know, by creating extra seats for factions or for special interest groups, and before you know it, you've got a sort of dictatorial situation, and the democracy, the internal democracy, is a sham, is a kind of shell. And so if you want to you know, avoid that situation, you have to get it right, even if you're happy with the current leadership. You know, you have to get it right when you're happy with the current leadership, because then when a new leadership comes along, you have to be sure that it's not going to, you know, abandon independence or soft open independence or whatever. You have to do it when the time is right, which is now.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to do it at the start. Set the
Can I
ground
just
rules.
say, I know you're recording this, James.
I am, yeah.
For use as a Scotland Goes Pop. I have some comments that I wouldn't want to go out on Scotland Goes Pop. So I don't know if it's possible to go into lobby terms or something along those lines.
Well, it would be a complete mess if I tried to record this in 2 parts. So maybe if you
don't.
If you hold off until I stop recording, then maybe you could.
Let's do that. Let's do that. Yeah,
right, okay.
Let's do that. I mean, what I will say is I thought the 6-member NEC, 6 ordinary members of the NEC on each side was a much better proposal. And I believe that if you want to encourage folks to be boots on the ground, you give them power. You say, look, your voice matters, what you think matters. The policies which you're coming forward with will go forward and have a chance of being adopted by the party. And I think that's the way to get people encouraged and people involved in going out on the doorstep for their policies, for the things that actually count to them in their neighbourhood and their, you know, their life ambitions. So, yeah, absolutely. We should very much be a member-led party. We should very much be looking for the views of members. And as NEC guys, you two should be representing the views of members and not simply waiting for someone in the executive to say, here, do this. You should be able to say, we as NEC members want you to do this. It should be a two-way street. It shouldn't just be a one-way communication.
I think when I was on, the NEC, it was, you know, it was the kind of learning curve for me, because I'd never been on a committee like that. And I think if I got back on, I would want to be much more sort of proactive. And I think, you know, you sometimes get a little bit intimidated with, you know, the chair sort of saying, well, do you really want to raise this issue? And, you know, I look back now and think, well, yeah, I did want to raise it, and there was no reason why I shouldn't have raised it. I think, you know, I hope this doesn't break confidentiality rules, but there is maybe a tendency for, you know, the leadership to know what the outcome they want is, and to sort of steer the meeting in that direction.
I think that goes across all organisations. That's not just Alba, that happens across.
Yeah,
I'm actually delighted that you all think that it should be 6, because it was actually myself and Fife Flack who put that amendment in. And I'd spoken to Alec about it, and when I spoke to him, he actually seemed, that's an idea, and then poo-pooed it. So
the argument against was we don't need people sitting at a computer screen, we need boots on the ground. I think I was quite frustrated last year. Well, I suppose from a personal point of view, I was frustrated because I couldn't go to the conference because because of the COVID issue. As we discovered last night, I've got an elderly relative who I have to be very careful around. But I mean, there are many reasons why people can't go to a conference, or why people can't do in-person events, or why people can't pound the streets, but they can make a contribution in other ways. But I felt, last year I felt like wasn't really even at the races to make that contribution because I was standing for the NEC. And I realise now, having been to this year's conference, that, you know, the real election campaign for the NEC takes place in person at conference. So if you're not there, you really haven't got a chance. I think I finished sixth with 4 places available, which was probably quite decent given that I wasn't actually there. But, you know, I think, you know, there's a perception sometimes that if you're not active in person, you're not really a proper member. And I think with modern technology, that is not, you know, and if you can bring people in, if you can make them active even online, then that's like a kind of step. It's a step towards, you know, it's a gateway drug towards maybe becoming involved in person. So the idea that you discourage people by saying, well, if you don't turn out to chap the doors at a local by-election, then you're no use to us and you're just like a kind of inactive member who doesn't really count as for anything, then well, that's not a very positive message to be sent.
That really reinforces the thing about the role of the website, the role of Hustings, etc. Because if you can't be at conference because you're a carer for a disabled child or whatever, then that should not exclude you. In fact, your voice should be heard on the NEC because you've got an experience that other people perhaps can't speak to.
And also, I mean, you can't vote. I mean, if you're not able to go to the conference, well, I suppose theoretically you could register for the conference and then vote online, but very few people would do that. So
you totally could.
If you're not going to if you're not unable to attend, you don't have a vote, which is, you know, you're a member of the party. The NEC is the governing body of the party. The basic principle of democracy, if you have a democratic member-led party, is that the governing body has to be fully elected. So that's the first thing. And then, well, yes, absolutely, we should have been having proper online hustings, I think. I mean, I suppose I would have tried to attend an in-person hustings, but there's been nothing. There's been absolutely nothing. I think 2 years ago, there were at least hustings for the national office bearer positions, but this time we haven't even had that.
I think last year there was no competition for a lot of the
No, there was nothing at all.
So there was no need for a hustings. But this year there is competition, and I don't think it should be in the purview of one person to say, well, we're not having hustings, because that apparently is how it's turned out.
Is that what's happened?
Well, I want to go confidential, but yes, apparently that's what's happened. Aye.
Well, I didn't hear anything about hustings because I was, I am standing for the membership support convener position, but I certainly haven't heard anything about hustings for that election.
Yeah.
James, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go.
Okay, no worries.
I've got a constituent coming in at 2, and I haven't done his paperwork yet.
No
Thank you for this. Are you having one at 7 o'clock tonight?
I'm having one at 9 o'clock if everything goes to plan.
Right.
So if you can come back for that if you want, and we'll see
I
if
will
it
do.
turns up after that one. I think we've done quite well to get 4 people today.
Right. Okay, guys.
Craig.
Thanks a lot. Speak to you soon.
And Trish has moved into an outdoor position.
Yes, I know. Craig's lucky. He's on his vape. He can do it in the house.
So Neil, do you have any other questions or?
Well, do you want to just pause on the recording side of things? Is that possible?
Well, I would rather not pause. If we want to complete do you think we've moved to the point where if we should complete it and you would just ask a question privately afterwards, or?
I think just maybe internal party business, move on to a private session, so to speak.
All right. Okay. Well, in that case, for those of you watching on the blog, thank you for joining us, and I hope you found this informal hustings for the Alba NEC elections helpful. And I don't know if it's too late now to vote for me for the membership support convener, but if it's not too late, please do so. And if you have a vote, if you're lucky enough to have paid the premium and have a vote for the NEC elections, then Trish and I are both standing. I'm sure we'd both be extremely grateful for your vote. And we're not in competition, so I can say that without prejudicing my own position. So thank you for joining us, and I'll see you later.